Hello there, welcome back to the channel. Today we are discussing Arctic 1, a small Earth science vessel associated with the Earth Science Institute and probably Starfleet as well. It's not exactly known if these vessels are owned and operated by Starfleet and leased out to the Earth Science Institute, which in my opinion makes a lot more sense. But we do know that Earth had other organizations other than Starfleet dedicated to the exploration of space, such as the United Earth Space Probe Agency. And the fact that this vessel was used for scientific exploration on Earth but had warp capability would imply that it had other uses other than simply exploring the Arctic Circle on Earth and doing scientific research on Earth specifically. This vessel was a relatively small transport used by Earth in the 2150s. One such vessel, Arctic 1 specifically, which is the one we are discussing, of course, was doing scientific research in the Arctic Circle. Specifically, this was the A6 expedition, and they were studying the debris field of some large, approximately 600-meter long spherical vessel of unknown alien origin that had been buried in the ice for over 100 years, or about 100 years by this point. Dum dum dum. This episode is often cited as quite a contentious one from Enterprise. Behind the scenes, they made this episode to try and raise the flagging ratings of the show by reintroducing a well-liked villain from the Next Generation and Voyager, that being the Borg, of course. And they did some tenuous linking of this episode to future events within the Next Generation when the Borg would be re-encountered, stating that the ship sent off a transmission that would take 200 years to roughly reach the point in the Delta Quadrant where it was being sent to. A lot of problems with that, assuming they're sending it to the Borg in the Delta Quadrant, but the Borg were everywhere across the galaxy, with transwarp hubs and other installations everywhere. Yeah, they might not have known the exact location of a specific Borg vessel at that time, but a place like a hub, they would have known about. No need to send it to there anyway. That's a sort of logic critique. Let's forget that. There's a lot of logic critiques to take apart that episode. But let's get back to the actual canon. The ship itself was outfitted with 2 skis to allow to facilitate better landing in Arctic conditions on the snow and the ice. It's not known if this was a standard configuration of the ship or if it was a specific modification to this one vessel. My feeling would be, unless this ship was specifically designed to explore icy conditions such as the Arctic on Earth, or planets like Europa or Titan, then, well, moons in their cases, then my feeling would be this was a simple modification done to the ship simply to allow it to land and more evenly distribute its weight on the snow. Most of the engines seem to be located in the rear of the ship, which would imply both warp and impulse were located at the rear. It was unarmed, but did have the ability to polarize its hull plating and had a maximum warp capability of warp 1.4 with a deflector/navigational array mounted in the nose of the ship. It was a relatively flat vessel, not very big, and was pretty much a scientific research vessel, which had light transport capabilities. 3 more vessels of this class were later seen as part of the fleet that welcomed Enterprise home after, the bad stuff with the Xindi, and 2 of them were seen in an alternate timeline, helping with the evacuation of what was left of humanity after the destruction of Earth at the hands of the Xindi. So we have multiple of this class of ship being developed. And as I said, this Arctic 1 was specifically owned and operated, or at least operated, by the Earth Science Institute. But again, my feeling would be this ship was more likely Starfleet, as when they lost contact with this expedition, it was Starfleet that sent a shuttle. It was them who were notified. This implies that either Starfleet was sponsoring, very likely were, because it's scientific research, the expedition down there, and the Earth Science Institute was simply the ones conducting it. And as we do know, many of the personnel that went there were not Starfleet personnel. They were independent researchers, part of that group. But that other institute didn't have other ships available, even shuttles, to go down and investigate. They had to contact Starfleet to render assistance. So which would imply the vessel probably did actually belong to Starfleet, or in some way Starfleet was affiliated, which would make a lot of sense as we know that Starfleet works closely with the United Earth Space Probe Agency as well. So the ship is a dedicated science vessel. It's a transport. It's unarmed. These are all things we know about it before the terrible thing happens. By the time Starfleet gets down there, they find all the humans are gone, as is Arctic 1. They tracked that it was leaving Earth orbit days earlier and went to warp. They last tracked it moving at speeds of around warp 3, because the Enterprise crew were contacted to try and intercept the ship as it zoomed off into the beta quadrant. I'm like, well, why are you contacting us? Because if someone's stolen Arctic 1, it's only got a warp 1.4 capability. But this vessel was upgraded with components and parts the Borg stripped from the remains of their own ship that was crashed on Earth, and allowed the vessel to accelerate faster. This combined with them assimilating and absorbing technology from other vessels that they would encounter along the way. It is interesting that the drones didn't try to assimilate Earth while they were there, but it is possible that they simply calculated that a handful of drones with the limited resources of an unarmed transport were probably not going to be a match for Earth's defenses, and thought better of it. And returning home may have simply been their default programming to go get reinforcements, which is what Archer and others thought that they were doing. The main mission for the Enterprise was to save the scientists and researchers, but they were beyond saving by the time they were encountered. The vessel had been heavily modified, not only with its propulsion and sensors being massively upgraded, as were now utilizing transporter systems that were definitely of Borg origin because of the coloration of the distortion effect that was created when the transporter was activated, but also was seen to be using Borg disruptors or cutting beam. Now, these were nowhere near as powerful as true Borg weapons, because a 24th century Borg disruptor should have cut the Enterprise in half, let's face it. So this was obviously an approximation with what maybe the equipment and supplies they had to hand, maybe even stripped off another alien ship, which they encountered. We do know they encountered at least one Tarkalian ship, and very likely others along the way. The vessel was ultimately destroyed by Enterprise when they realized there was no saving the humans who were aboard the ship, and the vessel was a direct threat to the Enterprise's security and potentially to the security of Earth, and was ultimately destroyed. But as I said, this was not the only one of its class. Multiple other vessels of this class did appear later on down the line. Exactly when it was brought into service, not entirely clear. How big it is, not entirely clear. But it was nowhere near the size of the Enterprise. I think we can agree on that. And considering the engine loadout all being left in the rear, and they look like giant impulse thrusters rather than traditional impulse engines, my guess would be this was actually a bit of an older design, maybe way predating the 2150s or even 40s. But let me know in the comment section down below what you think of this ship design. I personally think it's really cool. I love seeing vessels that are not just the hero ships. Ships like the Cerritos, I absolutely love lower decks for that. I really enjoy seeing background ships and the reality of what's actually going on in the background, because sometimes it feels like Enterprise-centric. Enterprise is the only ship in the fleet kind of thing. Admiral Forrest has nothing better to do than be on standby for when Archer gets on the horn to him. When in reality, Admiral Forrest would have command of dozens of starships on dozens of missions, as well as tens of thousands of personnel. Archer, the Enterprise, is just one ship, one crew. Very important, pioneering, groundbreaking ship, but just one ship. And it's really good to see all these sort of background vessels operating within Starfleet and Earth, especially learning that they're not necessarily even Starfleet. But what do you guys think? And would you like to explore what the Earth Science Institute actually was a little bit more in a future video? Let me know in the comment section down below. With that said, if you made it all to the video, I thank you for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe, and bye-bye.